Um, yeah, I think that's it. Also, don't use equipment. Don't fuck around. Just take out your shovels and just yeah, you can like I don't know, just sit still. Yeah, exactly. Also, don't talk over radio. Okay, so welcome to DC training session number, I believe it's 7. Um, GeForce and I are going to be covering vehicles for you today. We'll be covering basics about vehicle play as well as just in general sort of applications as well as what purposes vehicles serve in squad. We'll be going through each vehicle on an individual basis with not too much information because that would be boring. Um, we'll also be demonstrating the different sounds that the vehicle make, as well as telling you at what distance you can accurately, or at least start hearing the vehicle, which is actually different based on the vehicle that you're hearing or using. We'll also be covering just basically how you use the vehicle as a two-man crew, um, and additionally the all the sort of nuances that come into you using a vehicle in a squad or having a designated vehicle squad. All right, that sums up pretty much everything that we're going to talk about. So to give you a sort of basic, or at least if someone was to ask me what vehicles are in squad, what I would say is that they are high value team assets. And the reason why they're high value is because of 3 reasons. Number one, obviously, is because they have tickets attached to them. So a vehicle such as the BTR 82A, sorry, has 28 tickets attached to it. So if you lose that vehicle, you lose 28 tickets, compared to something like the Transport Techie, which will only cost you 3. So there's a huge difference. Um, the second point is that they're valuable because they provide firepower. They provide firepower versus enemy vehicles as well as infantry. There are vehicles that do better job at one thing than the other, and there are also vehicles like the Fremo that absolutely just destroy everything. But the drawback, obviously, is that you have to be conservative with your shots because you have 100 of each. While on the other side of the spectrum, you have, for instance, the light machine gun MTOB on the militia side, which does jack all against vehicles, so you will only be using it against infantry. And the third aspect of, or the reason why vehicles are valuable in squad is because they're a means of transportation, which is something that a lot of people seem to forget about. And V10 specifically, what I see a lot is people taking huge amounts of vehicles out of main at the start of a round, which is really bad because in the scenario where you absolutely need a vehicle, so you need to spawn at main because you don't have any other spawns and there are no vehicles present. At that point, you probably just lost the game simply because of that. So knowing which vehicle and how many vehicles you should take out of main at the beginning of a round is important. So when it comes to which vehicle you should take as a squad leader, it's your job sort of to transport your troops around the battlefield. You're the one that is going to tell them where to go, which points to cap, that sort of thing. So at the beginning of the round, choosing the right vehicle to transport your troops is very important. What you don't want to do is, for instance, let's say you spawn in and you say, okay, fuck it, there's no other vehicle. We're just going to take this BTR 80. So you take this BTR 80, you drive it to the point, you take everyone out of the vehicle, you drop a rally, everyone spawns. At that point, you realize that you have essentially taken a high value vehicle out of main, which you have not assigned anyone into. And at that point, you're panicking and you're thinking, okay, I should probably not waste this vehicle, so I'm just going to designate 2 random people to use it. The thing about that is, in pub games especially, when you're playing with a lot of randoms, giving a vehicle that has such value attached to it, as well as this vehicle in particular, for instance, it has so much potential to do damage to the enemy team that if you give it to individuals that don't know what they're doing necessarily, it's going to hurt your team compared to if you left that vehicle in your base and then allowed some other squads to take it that actually know what they're doing. So usually it is therefore best to take a low value vehicle, such as vehicles that are specifically designed to transport troops. So then we're talking about transport vehicles, such as trucks, as well as the techies. These are low ticket vehicles that have relatively low spawn timer as well. However, just because they are not high value vehicles doesn't mean that you should treat them like shit. If anything, they're actually just as valuable as every other vehicle, simply because a lot of the time, for instance, if you're playing versus competent players, what will happen is if you drive the vehicle recklessly and you end up having it behind enemy lines or in a spot where you can't retrieve it without sending a specific squad or just your own squad to retrieve it, you're essentially putting yourself at a huge disadvantage, because what they will essentially do, as in what the enemy team will do most likely, is they will camp the vehicle. They will not allow you to take it. They'll most likely not destroy it, because gaining 4 tickets or 6 tickets if they kill a transport truck is just not worth it. They can just camp it instead and deny you being able to transport your troops. So treating vehicles and parking them in spots where they're relatively safe, as well as accessible to other squads, not just yourself, is very important. You can also use vehicles such as the ones on my, I guess, left, not include, or actually you could include the MTOB in that list, since it doesn't have a lot of tickets attached to it. It's actually, let me check. It's 12 tickets or actually 8 tickets for this specific MTOB, so it's not a lot. When it comes to the BDRM, it's not really good as a transport vehicle because it only fits 3 people. And then you have the MRAP, which, depending on the variant, can fit from 4 to 5 people. Right. What was the next point? Right. So in a scenario, so let's go over when you actually have 2 individuals in your squad. So you have a full squad of people, 9 people in your squad, and you have 2 of them designated as driver and gunner for a vehicle. So let's say you took a striker or a BTR-80. Versus a scenario where you allow those 2 individuals to make a designated vehicle squad. The differences between the 2 alternatives is that when you have a squad of infantry and the 2 people that you designated as driver and gunner are in your squad, what it essentially does is, as a squad leader, you're making a trade-off. You're essentially trading 2 infantrymen. So that is, sorry, 2 infantrymen, so 2 rifles that could potentially hold 2 different angles, 2 infantrymen that could, support your medics when they're reviving, help you cap points, support your ATs, that sort of stuff. As a trade-off, however, you get essentially a highly mobile heavy machine gun emplacement, right? The disadvantage, however, is that even though you have the vehicle itself, in my belief, doesn't function at its fullest potential, simply because what will naturally happen is that this vehicle in particular will be sort of attached to your squad and your squad only. So this vehicle will most likely just follow the squad leader around and help that one squad. Compare that to a designated vehicle squad. What happens there is essentially you eliminate the entire thing about the trade-off that I just described. And additionally, you get a vehicle squad that is sort of independent, right? You have 2 people that work with a vehicle and can on their own decide, based on the information they get from other squad leads, where to put that vehicle to its fullest potential, right? So they can achieve that through denying entire areas, establishing vehicle control on the map, or whatever it might be, right? And they can themselves choose which squad or which position on the map to support. Right. So that is the 2 differences, I guess, between the having a designated vehicle squad and 2 people in a full squad having a vehicle. Right. So now we get into how you actually operate a vehicle as a 2-man crew. So essentially a gunner and a driver. Now, this is the part of the training session that I think is the most subjective, and it's simply because the things we're going to describe now are sort of our experiences, that is mine and GeForce's as a vehicle crew. And these are not necessarily sort of, rules set in stone about how you're supposed to be operating a vehicle. But these are definitely things that we've been using for a while now and been successful with. So therefore, we're going to present it to you. So in a, just bugged for you. What do you mean?
You can't see the striker?
No, I can't see that MTLB that Yum's left of Yum on the map.
For some reason, I can see.
Yeah, all right,
like,
it's fine.
hovering all over the place.
Oh, really?
yeah.
Okay. All right, that's fine. All right, so where was I? Shit, can you remind me? Fuck.
Something about
Vehicles,
And
vehicle
their
roles.
roles.
Oh, right, vehicle roles. Right. So, as a vehicle squad, the way we do things usually, Chuck Norris, could you stop, please? Thank you. The way GeForce and I do things as a vehicle squad is essentially that majority of the time I'll be the gunner. As a gunner, I'll also be the squad leader of the vehicle squad, as well as sort of, you can say, the commander of the vehicle. So what I will be doing is, because of the vision available to me through the optics of the vehicle, I have very good information as well as general sense of my surroundings about what's happening on the battlefield, as well as I also get the information from other squad leads about what's going on on the map in general, which then gives me the ability to choose what to do with the vehicle and where to go with it in a general sense, so that we can hopefully achieve victory, right? And obviously, like, kill as many people as we can. Obviously, like, the obvious thing as a gunner that you have to do is you press mouse 1. Occasionally, you'll also be pressing Q to zoom in. You're essentially killing stuff and actively scanning for targets and killing them as you see fit. Even though, so in our scenario where I'm the commander of the vehicle and I'm essentially deciding where we go, it doesn't necessarily mean that I specifically have to micromanage GeForce and tell him exactly how he positions the vehicle or which exact sort of corner of a street or which side of the street we're going to sit on. That's sort of the stuff that he decides what to do, which GeForce, if you could go into deeper into your role as a driver.
So as a driver, you are responsible of the vehicle surviving. That means that wherever you're going is up to you to place the vehicle in the right position. So if you are taking a risky move to push forward instead of holding the angle for possibly the enemy vehicle to push you, you are risking taking out the vehicle, but you are also making a trade-off for you can possibly kill the vehicle, but you will possibly die, and that will lose you some map coverage and aerial denial because you are gone. So that is some things you need to remember as a driver, that you are the only one who's driving the vehicle, and wherever your commander says that you should be moving at that AO, you need to be always remembering the audio profile of the vehicle, if you have the engine turned on, if you where you're placed, so if you can be flanked and possibly enemy infantry. That is some things that you need to be considering every time you move somewhere.
Right. Essentially, the way I describe it is, as a driver, you're pretty much the enabler. So you're the one that puts the vehicle in a specific spot that allows your gunner to succeed at its job. You're the one that enables your gunner to do a good job. Also, obviously, like as a driver, knowing the extent that the vehicle can endure, or I guess the limits of the vehicle when it comes to its physical ability to drive. So for instance, if you look to your, I guess, right where I'm aiming, and you follow my bullets, this is a basic thing, but knowing that going up a hill in a straight line like this, it's probably idiotic. However, if you go on an angle and on the side, you're still retaining speed as well as still climbing the mountain, which is basic stuff, but it's the sort of basic shit that you have to know to succeed. Right, I think that's it pretty much. We can go into the sound presentation as well as just talking about each vehicle on an individual basis. Right, so we started with the 30 mil. If you could follow us, please. Right, so we got actually both of the 30 mil. So one of them is the BTR, obviously. The other one is the MTOB. They have the exact same gun, they take the exact same damage. The only difference between the two is that they make different sounds, they look differently, as well as the shitbox drives like shit. That's pretty much it. Yeah, scopes are different, but that's a minor thing. They have the same gun, so both are equipped with a 30mm anti-material round, which is used for primarily anti-tank. But you also have HE rounds, so you have essentially 100 rounds of each. You have 100 rounds of AP and HE, as well as a light machine gun turret, which you should be using majority of the time versus infantry. But the HE rounds are also pretty good at eliminating infantry as well. When it comes to AP rounds, you should only be using them against vehicles. You can, however, pierce through walls as well as barriers with the 30 mils AP rounds. However, be mindful that because you have so few of them, you should be not doing that too often, because you might there might come a scenario where you will just run out of bullets and you'll die because of it. Right, so GeForce, if you could just start the vehicle and just take a few circles. So this is also going to be the part of the presentation where we showcase sounds. What we want you to remember is the sound signature that all the vehicles have. Right, so you're gonna, right. So GeForce is right now showcasing the range at which you can hear the vehicle. The cutoff sound for the BTR 82A as well as the 80 is roughly the same. It's 170, 150 meters, something like that. So keep that in mind. Right. So after the MTOB, I've pretty much just covered the gun. But if we go into the sound itself, what you'll notice is that it has the loudest, pretty much, sound signature out of all vehicles in the game, which you can hear up to 400 meters, which yeah, is insane. Like it's the loudest vehicle in the game, and also because it drives like shit, it doesn't make it really an attractive choice, but that's what you have to work with. Now, keep in mind that these are ideal circumstances that we have here. Like, there's no fighting going on, there's no gunshots, no other vehicles are present, like all the engines on those vehicles are turned off. So, like, keep that in mind that usually, like, yeah, here we're showcasing that, for instance, the BTR 80 will be audible at 150, 170 meters. But in reality, you'll probably hear it when it's closer than that. Right. So off to the striker. All right. I also didn't cover how much tickets they are worth. I mentioned that the BTR 82A is worth 28 tickets. The 30 mil MTOB I actually did not check, so I'm gonna check that right now. Just give me a second. Completely forgot about that. It's worth 16 tickets, which is much better than the BTR 82A, but obviously the trade-off is that it's not as maneuverable and comfortable to drive. So after the striker, it's equipped with a 50 cal heavy machine gun, just like the MRAP, as well as every other American emplacement. It has 500 rounds worth of ammo on a single belt, so you don't have to reload. It's worth 24 tickets, and it is also relatively loud. Its sound signature is also very unique. So usually when you hear this vehicle, you'll know immediately that it is a striker. And right, so you can go ahead and actually, no, I can just tell you. The vehicle is audible at 300 meters. So that's the range at which you will start to hear it.
Can I
Yeah.
just quickly say, I often mistake the striker sound and the Ural sound. To me, they're quite similar, at least. That's it.
The Ural, as in the...
Yeah, the Logi, the
the,
Transpo, those trucks. Yeah, the trucks and the striker,
Yeah,
I
copy.
think they sound the same, or very
Demolition
similar.
or
Yeah.
you mean? Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
I've
Yeah,
heard
we
it with the
will-
MRAP.
We will get
continue.
into that later. We're soon done with this one, gentlemen. All right. So the very common matchup that you'll see in game is the BTR 80 versus the striker. So we can just get on to the BTR 80 right now. The striker will always win versus a BTR 80, and the single or two reasons for that is that the BTR 80 has less health. As well as the fact that, yes, even though you can fire 49 rounds out of it in a single burst without the gun overheating, you still have to reload. And the fact that you have to reload makes the vehicle lose versus the striker, because you need to hit exactly 67 shots to kill a striker. However, in a scenario where your one of your infantry ATs hits a rocket on a striker, that's when the BTR-80 can actually kill the striker. Also, another thing that I didn't that I forgot to include is the amount of rockets that you need to hit on each and single one of those vehicles that we covered so far. So when it comes to both of the BTRs, they take 3 rockets if they're rapid fire, and 4 rockets if they are spread out. Now the difference is that if the rockets are spread out, it means that you don't put the vehicle on fire. What that means is, in order to put a vehicle on fire, you have to do enough damage in a short amount of time. That's when the vehicle will start burning, and it will take damage over time. The striker will always take 4 hits, regardless if they're spaced out or rapid. The MTOB, every single variant of the MTOB, even the militia as well as insurgent variants, they all have the same health as the BTRs. Right, if you could, GeForce, if you could get into the gun of the 80.
Yes.
I'm gonna sit behind the vehicle and just see if you can see my head. Can you see my head?
I can see ahead.
Try and shoot me. Right. So what you're seeing here right now is that GeForce is trying to shoot me when I'm behind the vehicle. What he's actually doing now is that he's not healing shit. In fact, he's healing himself. If he goes now to the driver's seat, he'll notice that he took damage, and that's because he was, well, literally shooting himself. Which is something that you have to be mindful of. It also works on the side, on an angle such as this one, where I'm standing right now. You also shoot yourself. So when you're escaping, you have to be aware of that. Right, after the we already covered the MTOB. The only difference with this one is the gun, which is a NSVT Russian 50 cal, which is 12.7 by, correct me if I'm wrong, 103. I'm not sure. It's very similar to the American 50 cal. It has a 100 round belt. However, the problem with it is that it overheats quite a lot. So versus a striker, for instance, you need to outflank as well as try and conceal yourself as much as possible to kill it. Right, after the BRDM, GeForce, if you could get inside. The BRDM fits 3 people, which is why I said at the beginning that it is not the best choice for transporting troops, only if like you want the gunner to be perhaps the squad lead, and then you have the third slot as an extra soldier, and you get out and you put a rally. Right, it takes 2 rapid fire shots from an AT to kill it, and 3 spaced out shots. Yeah, if they're spaced out from rockets. It has the exact same gun as the BTR-80. It's the 14.5 KPVT with 50 rounds belts that you can reload, I believe, 9 times, or you have 9, so 9 times 50, 450 rounds. Right, that's pretty much it. After the MRAP, the MRAP is the US pretty much equivalent of the Russian scout card. The difference is that it has a weaker gun, and it doesn't fit. It fits more people actually. There are 2 variants of it. You have the Crow and the Open Top. The Open Top is absolute garbage. Whenever you can, use the Crow, simply because the reason being is in the Open Top, what happens is the gunner can get shot out of the vehicle, which nullifies its effectiveness in combat. It just like the BRDM, it's I guess fine if you want to be on the move a lot and stuff like that. But in general, you want to avoid using them simply because they will be killed by pretty much every other vehicle to my right from now. So it will be killed by the BTRs, the striker. I mean, you will never find yourself in a scenario where the striker will be shooting at it, but yeah, just saying, it's usually not a good idea to use it unless you have to. On the map, like for instance, OP First Light. Right, after the Techie. The Techie is the most basic vehicle that you can use in combat. It has variety of weaponry, which also dictates how much tickets it costs. So this one in particular is a Dushka. You need to hit an entire belt worth of ammo to kill a striker with it. However, as you can see, the gunner is exposed, and even in the variant where you have the shield, the 50 cal will pierce right through that, which makes the vehicle ineffective when it's stationary. However, if you manage to organize a group of people and have, let's say, 3 or 4 of them, and maybe one of them being an SPG techie, which is a rocket techie, or it shoots armor piercing rockets, what you can do is you can gang up on a striker on a map like Albasha, for instance. However, it's not necessarily a tactic that you'll see often because in order to pull it off, you need organized play. And also, it's one of the cheapest vehicle to use in the game, which is why it's very popular to just use to transport troops. Right. So off to the 3 lodges that we have in the game. What you'll notice with the 2 first, so the one I'm standing on, as well as the one to my right, is that they're very similar. And the reason why is they're technically both Russian. They have different engines, and on the front, the hood looks differently, as well as they sound differently. So if you can get into the first one, do a couple of circles to showcase that. Another thing to note with these two is that you can, in a scenario where you're playing as US and you're playing versus Russia or Insurgent, you can easily notice that this is the enemy logi if you're on the US side. And the reason being is of the bars that you have in the trunk of the vehicle. These bars will only be there for Russian and Insurgent. Techies, or not techies, but Insurgent and Russian logis as well as transports. As you see as well, the Russian logi makes a whole bunch of noise, whereas the Insurgent one, INS one, makes very little noise. After the American one is easily spottable. It's usually going to be in desert camo, however, in V10 they implemented sort of woodland camo that you can see in those vehicles as well. And again, it has a very unique sound signature as well. Yeah, and as I said, it doesn't have the bars on the back, so you can easily identify it. Before I go into these two things here, the thing to note, if you want to be certain that the vehicle you're standing next to is the enemy vehicle, the best thing to go about it is just simply opening up your map. By opening up your map and finding yourself on it, and then seeing if there's a vehicle market next to you, that means that it's your vehicle. It sounds pretty basic, but a lot of people, especially ATs, the amount of times you see randoms friendly fire their own vehicles because they don't know if it's a friendly or not is honestly insulting. So if you're not sure if the vehicle that's approaching you is enemy, always check your map. Right. So after these,
The lodges also take 2 hits plus burn damage if they are
Yeah.
fired rapidly. But they also they take 3 hits if they are not consecutive.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I forgot to mention that. Right, so these two ladies right here are the AA guns that you've probably seen. They have been implemented since V10. As I've said before, they're absolute garbage, and the reason why is because while their guns are somewhat powerful, the problem with them is that the gunner is exposed. So if GeForce, if you could get in on the gun, showcase that. The gun exposed, it's like being in the open top MRAP on steroids. It's absolute garbage because any infantryman can just shoot you off the vehicle with no issue at all, from almost any angle. As you see, this is a truck, so it will take the exact same amount of damage as any of the transports and logis, and the other variant is an MTOB, which takes the exact same damage as every other MTOB in the game. Right. Yeah, this is the end of the training session. We're gonna close off with just a few words that I want to say about just maps and strategy as well as tactics that are attached to vehicle play. In order to pull off effective vehicle play, it is my belief, and not even effective vehicle play, just in general being effective as a squad player, is knowing the maps well, knowing the meta well, as well as when you're, let's say you're in the 30, knowing the positions of enemy vehicles, where you can expect them on the map, knowing possible enemy fob locations, where the infantry is going to push, most likely, stuff like knowing where you're going to meet contact probably at the start of the match also helps a lot. By essentially knowing that information makes your judgment about how you move with the vehicle that much better. Also, just in general, vehicle play, as well as you can say to a certain degree, squad play in general, involves balance between risk versus reward, as well as perhaps playing it safe. So when it comes to vehicle play, for instance, as an example, pushing close to the enemies, so for instance, infantry, while being aggressive might result you in getting lots of kills, it also puts your vehicle at risk, as GeForce mentioned before. And it's a risk that is completely unnecessary unless you absolutely have to push, which a lot of the time is not going to happen, right? A lot of the time, what you do with a vehicle is you want to use the optics that you have to snipe people from long range. However, the balance that you have to find is that you can't be too close to the point where it's easy for the enemy ATs to fire at you, while at the same time, you can't be too far away, because if you're too far away from the action, you'll be blocked off by terrain, as well as physical objects like houses, etc., which will prohibit you from actually killing stuff. So this is the sort of balance that you have to find as well as think about when you're playing. Right, so that concludes the vehicle training that we have been working on for the past, I think, what, 3 weeks or something like that.
Any questions?
On and off. If there are any questions or suggestions, or if like you want to engage in like a discussion,
I have some
then
feedback.
that's perfectly
Yes, come on.
Yeah.
When you were discussing the sounds, it would be actually good if you were like to wouldn't say a word, so we can actually hear the sound when it would cut out. Just a minor tip. So
Yeah,
like,
we
when you
Yeah.
were speaking and you were
Yeah,
like discussing the
that's-
sound, like that you would like stop speaking so we could hear the sound when it cut out.
Mm.
yeah,
Let's,
we thought about having taking every vehicle out and doing that, but when you are taking like almost every vehicle out on 400 meters, it will approximately take 10 minutes for those vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Also,
the
we should
concern
do
we had
feedback
is that-
specifically on the training course. Just do that in text afterwards, because I'm still recording.
All right. Yeah, we can do that.
So questions
So
about the
any
training
questions?
specifically.
Involving
see-
this.
As an AT person, so basically, if
Yo,
you have two
that
rockets,
fucking
you
asshole.
can't kill anything.
You can kill
Based-
MRAPs, no, sorry, yeah.
MRAPs, scout cars,
Logi
Logis.
trucks, yeah.
I thought Logis took 3.
That's it.
and
No,
burned
no,
them.
no. Logis take 2. There's sort of
If
Even if you're, let's say, you're the only one AT on your squad, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not effective versus vehicles, because hitting a vehicle once will probably scare it enough to reposition, and then allowing your squad to actually move up. If you hit 2 rockets, vast majority of people will retreat at that point. They will RTB to base to repair. So at that point, you've already done your job. Yeah, sure, you didn't kill the vehicle, but since you're the only AT, that's the only thing you can do, really. So yeah.
But as tactics go, though, would you want to like use your 2 rockets, or would you want to try and get support before attacking the vehicle?
That depends. It's a very situational thing. Like if you have friendlies like blueberries around and their ATs around, obviously you assume that they're gonna see the vehicle when you see it and hear it when you hear it. So you should always just shoot it when you see it, right? In organized squad play, when you have 2 ATs working together, that's a different story. At that point, you can take out any vehicle in the game, which means that the 2 of you should be working together as closely and as accurately as you possibly can. To essentially ensure that when you start using your AT rockets, that you actually kill the vehicle.
Okay.
Right. Anything else? All right. I think that concludes the training session, and now the killing proceeds, I guess. Yeah, so obviously, since this is our very first training session that we held, like if it was shit, just say it. I want constructive criticism, so that we can improve. Or if If it's so shit beyond redemption, then say that as well. Because yeah, like honesty is something that I value a lot, and I'm sure GeForce does as well. So yeah,
Alright,
thanks for being here, Ryder. Peace.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining the training.